Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla, let's go over the market, let's figure out what is happening and what we can expect moving into next week. I believe this should be the last trading day, if I'm not mistaken, of September. Yeah, because the Monday is of course going to be the 2nd of October. So the final trading day of the month. And of course, we're entering a pretty massive weekend because we have Tesla's third quarter delivery numbers coming out. So we'll see how that goes as well, because that will, of course, influence the stock price. At least it most likely will, right? So all that being said, if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. It does help a lot. Of course, this is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And my membership section on YouTube is live. The link is below if you're interested. $3 a month. And yeah, you get my intraday thoughts on Tesla. And I'll give updates and all those things on the chart as the stock is trading. But moving into a Tesla closing in just not too much longer, really just a few more minutes. Closing at about $250 per share, which is going to be an increase in about 1.6%, which compared to the market is a respectable outperformance. Now, what does this mean, right? So there's a few things to talk about here. The first and foremost, we'll start on the 65-minute chart, right? So as you can see, right, we talked about this yesterday, how we're potentially setting up this little bit of, inverse head and shoulders. We can even go on like a 1 hour chart, even same kind of idea, right? Inverse head and shoulders. Now, the issue here that's a little bit weird is like the right shoulder is obviously extremely small. So it's like, it's a little bit funky, right? This is like a nice looking shoulder head, and the right shoulder is obviously looking a little small, but in theory, it could be more than enough, right? But the thing that you want to be paying attention to here is, assuming, of course, this pattern did play out, it seems like, or is playing out rather, it seems like it's looking pretty good so far. And the reason I say that is mainly because, well, you can see, right, we have the left shoulder, the head, the right shoulder. And this right here, the blue line you can see is essentially the neckline, right? That's the line that you want to break in order to activate the pattern. And it seems like that's what we're doing. We had a bit of a gap up today, came back down, pretty much gap filled. Actually, just noticed we actually pretty much gap filled. So that's actually pretty good news too, in my opinion, right? The gap fill is great to see, right? And then not only that, but we also essentially arguably bounced off of this blue line, which is the neckline. So like I said, like I always say, whenever you break out, it's common to retest. And that's kind of what happened, right? Again, head and shoulders, inverted, bullish, breakout above the neckline, came back down, gap filled, retested as well, so far successfully, and so far we're finding a very respectable bounce from there. So this pattern so far seems to be activating at least pretty well. Now, obviously the issue here is the fact that with something like delivery numbers, literally in just a couple of days over this weekend, obviously if it's like a major miss or something like that, it'll just completely nullify this pattern, because these kind of major kind of catalysts can of course impact certain technical patterns, unfortunately. But as of right now, it's just strictly from a TA perspective, it's not looking too bad, right? So that's number one. Number two, we talked about how when you measure the bottom to the top, right? So we can do it again, I guess, right? If you measure from kind of the bottom ish of the head and shoulder patterns, from the head to like the neckline roughly is where you measure, give or take, of course, it's just rough estimation. And then from where you break out, you can see, right, somewhere around the line, around the lines of this, you can see where it takes us, right? Which is going to be around that 260-ish level, which kind of lines up to what we have over here, right? This kind of downtrend that we started-ish, this small downtrend that we started ever since this kind of 280 level that we, reached. Then we started going downwards from there, right? But it did set up a little bit of a downward channel that we are in as well on the kind of shorter time frame, which is, of course, this larger blue line over here, which coincidentally enough, this head and shoulders pattern, assuming it plays out, pretty much takes us very, very close to the top, or to rather retest this downtrend line once again, which from there, of course, we'll have to see how we react. But that would be my first kind of main target, right? Again, 255 to as high as about 260 would be the main, or I guess the first level I'll be eyeballing, assuming, of course, that the delivery numbers aren't just atrocious or something like that, and at least in line with what expectations are. So that's kind of what I'd be expecting. Now, that's the 65-minute chart. Let's go over to the daily chart. Now, the daily chart is interesting as well. So we're getting a bit of a doji candle here, not too crazy, because we did get just a bit of a pump actually just ever since I started recording. But you can see usually when the wicks are this long on both sides, and the actual candles, like the candle itself, like the thick part, is as narrow as possible. This is a little less narrow than I would like it, but assuming it's like extremely narrow to where essentially it open and close at the same price, that usually, number one, signals potential indecision, which makes sense with, of course, something like delivery numbers coming out this weekend, right? Obviously some indecision there, but also it's a bit of a doji candle where usually it signals, again, also indecision, but potentially a bit of a reversal. Now, in this case, I wouldn't say this is much of a reversal signal, mainly because we're not really in an uptrend, because this would only be a reversal to the to stop the uptrend and start going back down. But we're not really in an uptrend here, right? It's a very, very, very minimal uptrend. So I wouldn't put too much weight into it. I would personally look at it as just strictly being indecision. Again, mainly probably because of those delivery numbers coming out this weekend. But with that being said, taking a look at the daily once again, you can see we are getting rejected now by the 50-day moving average, which is the orange line, and of course the kind of yellowish line, the gold line, which is the 21 EMA, right? Obviously finding some rejection there, like we talked about, like we technically should have. Also should have been support here, but it really didn't really act like it, which was surprising. But on top of that, we're also finding some resistance at this volume profile. You can see as this volume is much higher. Like if I zoom out, for instance, you can see, right, how much kind of thicker, if you will, or longer, whatever you want to call it, or higher, I guess, the volume is pretty much around this kind of mid 250s-ish level. And that's exactly where we are currently finding that resistance. So something else to keep in mind that, you know, this is an area to find resistance. But if the delivery numbers happen to be a beat, then that will be a phenomenal catalyst to bring us above these major levels and hopefully turn them into a support. Unfortunately, if it's a major miss or the market just doesn't like the news for whatever reason, then of course the sell-off should most likely continue, and we're not obviously, you know, breaking out of this little downtrend just yet. So that's another way to consider. Also, that 65-minute line that I showed you guys, that downtrend we are in, you can also easily put it over here on the daily, right? Similar like this, take it from this top of this little uptrend that we were in, and then of course line it up, and then it looks something like that, right? So pretty much the exact same downtrend, which again also takes us to about that 260 level, assuming we come up to retest it and assuming we play out that inverted bullish head and shoulders pattern. So those, in my opinion, are the main things. Now looking at the RSI, again, pretty neutral RSI, nothing to really note there. The MACD is starting to, you know, get a little bit neutral as well, right? Obviously still on the bearish side of it, but it's definitely not getting more bearish, right? It's actually getting, if anything, a little bit less bearish. So it's starting to go towards a neutral position there as well. The Bollinger Bands, you can see here, not much to show as well, right? It's kind of spread apart, but I personally don't really care too much about the Bollinger Bands until we really touch one of the sides. That's when I really care about it. Or if it's really starting to kind of contract a lot, that's when I really start caring about it. But with that being said, we are very close to the white line, which is the median line. So it's, in my opinion, a very neutral indicator as of right now. Not going to be giving us too much information. We still have, of course, the 100-day moving average below us that has so far acted as a support, which is great to see. And of course, it is getting closer to the 50-day moving average, which, you know, is a little concerning. And the reason I say that is because if the 50-day moving average crosses below the 100-day moving average, that's a bit of a bearish sign. So you definitely don't want to be seeing that. And that's kind of, you know, they're kind of starting to get closer and closer, right, compared to, let's say, back here. So something to pay attention to over the next couple of weeks, because that's when things, assuming they don't change much from here, will start getting even closer and a little bit spooky, I guess, for the bulls, maybe a little bit exciting for the bears. Now, those are the main things to look at. We have, of course, the order book flow, right? We have buy orders here, and we have the block we're in right now is apparently a buy order block, and the next sell order block is pretty much sitting all the way up in the 270s. So take that for what it's worth as well. We have, of course, the squeeze indicator we talked about many times, still showing green circles. So that one red circle was a bit of a bait and didn't really give us too much information, unfortunately, right? So take that for what it's worth. If we go over to the weekly, we can take a look at the pivot, which is also not showing us anything meaningful. Usually for the pivot, I wait for, at the very least, a dark, either red or dark kind of, you know, teal greenish bar. That's number one. And especially if it has this kind of see-through transparent large bar or like, I guess, rectangle, if you will. That's usually what I look for. As of right now, we're not getting anything, so, you know, don't really care too much about that as well. But while we're here, let's take a look at the weekly chart, right? So like I said many times, the weekly chart, there's a couple things to talk about. The bearish side, of course, as usual, and I've been saying it many times, is the fact that we still in theory could be playing out this unfortunate massive bear flag. The only way I would personally be confident that this bear flag, you know, has a much lower chance of triggering is if we break above 300. If Tesla can break above 300, I'd be a little bit more confident, in all honesty. But as long as we're in this channel, I view it as a bear flag until, at the very least, obviously we break down, then of course it executes, or we break above 300, and in my opinion, it starts getting a little bit nullified. But on the bullish side of things, we are having the 100-day moving average on the weekly chart acting as a support. You can see here, and we're kind of bouncing off of it as I kind of zoom in, which is good to see. And we're so far finding support at a pretty important level on the weekly, which is good. So that's a pretty nice thing to see. The MACD has been surprisingly neutral. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the squeeze indicator. It's not really showing anything here either, unfortunately. I thought it would, because the MACD has just pretty much been going sideways. Like, it's very unusual, actually. If you take a look at the MACD, but let's just zoom out a little bit, right? It doesn't, I mean, it did it actually for a while over here, but that's because it's not on log, right? It's a little bit, it's like scrunched up. So if we take a look at it, ever since Tesla really started being a lot more volatile, ever since like the move, let's say over here, right? It's not often that it stays this neutral and this kind of like, just not really showing a direction for this long, right? Usually, you know, the most recent time was way back in 2020 over here, but ever since then, it's usually had a pretty obvious direction in terms of, you know, whether the green bars or the red bars, right? A little bit over here, I guess, you know, but this is probably the longest streak we've had in a while. So take that for what it's worth. I mean, that's a little bit interesting. The MACD seems confused. It doesn't know where it wants to go, whether this is a bear flag, whether it's going to break out to the upside and nullify the bear flag. It almost feels like it doesn't know what it wants to do. So that's something to consider, because this means that there's still potential momentum building up, and there's some catalyst, almost as if they're being waiting on, whether it's a bearish catalyst or a bullish catalyst, to really propel the stock to a direction. And again, I think it'll be a pretty severe direction once it does pick one, because again, if it's the downside and this bear flag does play out, I think it'll be a pretty severe downtrend, and I think it'll be pretty aggressive as well. Unfortunately for the bears, rather, if it's to the upside, I think it'll be a pretty nice, respectable move to the upside as well, assuming we break above 300 especially. But those are things that we'll talk about as they come, of course. But that's kind of the main thing I'm looking at. Let's take a quick look at options flow right now if you're interested, because this always is nice to see. And it looks like moving into the weekend, options flow is looking pretty darn bullish. Honestly, it's actually looking pretty damn good. It got a lot more bullish than when I was looking at it earlier today. So pretty much just straight up green circles across the board. So we'll see how this plays out. People seem to be bullish on delivery numbers, and they expect to beat. So at least that's what the options market is saying. So we'll see if that's true. We'll see if that is the case or not. But that is kind of what I am seeing right now for today, I guess. So let me know what you guys think down below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. The weekly time frame actually is showing a doji candle. This is kind of the doji candle I was talking about. Very small candle itself with massive wicks on both sides, also showing a bit of indecision. And again, potentially a reversal sign as well, rather on the daily. Sorry, what does the weekly look like? Let me see if the weekly looks like that. No, yeah, the daily. Yeah, this is a doji candle. So again, technically shot signs of reversal, but because we're not that much of an uptrend anyways, really, to me, it's just a bit more of indecision. But nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on Monday. Peace.